Yesterday, we began the Sugi Rabbi Akiva B'Chayvei Lavin, and we want to continue that. So if you have the pages, it's page Ayin Dalet. And we were trying to figure out, how did the Gemara know for sure that according to Rabbi Akiva, in the case of Chayvei Lavin, there's no Yibum? Because ostensibly we should apply the principle of Esei Dochalosas. In the case of Chayvei Krisus, we said that we're going to derive the conclusion that Ein Esei Dochalosas Sheish Bo Karetz. So in the case of the Yibum of Achos Ishto, there won't be any Yibum because the Esei of Yibum does not have the power to override Olav Sheish Bo Karetz. But in the case of Mamzeres, or we spoke about Krus Shivcha, in these cases of Chayvei Lavin, why shouldn't the Yibum, the mitzvah Yibum, be powerful enough to override the Losas? It's only a regular law. Now we had a long discussion yesterday based on the Ramban. And today we want to see two other sources that address this question. We're going to see the Tosa Rosh, and we're going to see the Avnei Miluv. So if you have that, it's on the top of page Ayin Dal. Okay? So Doc, if you want to look at Ayin Dal, if that helps you. This is from a book called Yalkut Bi'urim. Okay then? Ayin Dal would be on your right side, am I right? The Tosa Rosh says, Yesh mitartzim, shekimle la Talmud, shesov Rabbi Akiva keRebbi. There's another link in the chain here, and that's Rebbe. And there are those who want to claim that Rabbi Akiva accepted Rebbe. What point did Rebbe make? Apoter arayos miyibum mirichsiv v'lakcha lo leisha. And what that means is that the mitzvah of Yibum applies if and only if there are lekuchen. That means ishus, which means if she's a bas lekicha, then there's a mitzvah of Yibum. And then the Torah says, L'akcha lo leisha. But if she's a lav bas lekuchen and ein kedushin tovsim ba, then she's not included in the mitzvah of Yibum. And that was Rebbe's source for deriving the conclusion that there's no Yibum in the case of an Erev. If we would apply the sheet of Rabbi Akiva in the background of the Alfusa of Rebbe, then Chayvei Lavin the Shitaso, since Lo Totzav and Kedushin, that's Rabbi Akiva's unique shita, is therefore Bechlal V'Lakcha. She cannot be included in the mitzvah of Lakcha because we need a bas Lekicha, and Chayvei Lavin is not a bas Lekicha. Again, it's a little bit complicated here because if she's a Mamzeres, then she's not a bas Lekicha. If, on the other hand, he's a Krus Shivcha, there's nothing wrong with her. She's a bas Lekucha. But according to Rabbi Akiva, he cannot consummate a marriage and create ishus in this case, simply because of the Chayvei Lavin situation. That also is considered a hafka of lokha. It's not possible to fulfill the lokha. So this is a brilliant answer that the Rosh quotes in the name of many Mefarshim, but he rejects. And he has a Gemara in Masechet Shabbos, which you'll see, the note he tells you to look in Samach Tes, and there Rabbi Akiva derives the principle of Kol Dovashes Dora Karchi Goso Chatos from Torah Achas Yilachem, the Lo Me'oleh. So the Gemara has a machlokes there between Chachamim and Rebbe. The Chachamim use the word Oleh as a p'tur, as a source for the p'tur of Erva. Rebbe derives the p'tur of Erva from V'lakcha lo lebas. And Rebbe now is going to be hard pressed because if he derives the p'tur of Erva from V'lakcha, then what's he going to do with the word aleh? So the Chachamim use the word aleh to exclude an erva, but Rebbe excludes an erva under the word v'lakcha. So what's he going to do with aleh? And the Gemara answers that he uses the aleh for the halach of karbanos, if you recall, that you're only chayav a karban chatas if you violate a lav sheish bo kares b'mezid and you bring a chatas b'shogeg. And as it turns out, the Gemara says that Rabbi Akiva also derives this principle of davar shizon of kares, but not the way Rebbe derives it from the pasuk aleh, but rather he derives it from Torah achas yelach, which equates avodah zarah, where the Torah explicitly says you bring a chatas with all other averos, and it's got to, meet up to that standard of avodah zarah, which is the chiyuv kares, the mezid, the chiyuv chatas b'shogeg. To make a long story short, Rosh rejects this beautiful answer based on a Gemara and Shabbos. Gemara and Shabbos will prove to us that in terms of the whole, dynamics, or shall we call it the domino theory of drashos, Rebbe and Rabbi Akiva are mutually exclusive. They cannot both have the same drasha of v'lakcha bas lekuchen. If only Rabbi Akiva was free to accept that drasha, then we'd have an answer to this kasha. How do we know for sure that according to Rabbi Akiva, there's no yibum in the case of chayvei lav? And now we get to the Avnei Malub. Everybody knows who the Avnei Malub is. He's just famous for another sefer that he wrote, Shef Shmaita, and he's more famous for another work that he wrote, the Ketzos HaChoshen, right? So on Even Ezer, he wrote a book called the Avnei Malub. And he suggests the following answer. This is going to incur the wrath of all the Achron. Rashi has a very unique shita, which we'll get to later on in this Masechta. And that is that just like the din is that erva undermines and torpedoes tfisas kedushin, if a man would marry an erva, right? So here's an erva, and now he says harei mekudeshes. So she was an erva at the time of the marriage, and there's no tfisas kedushin. Rashi goes a step further. He says the following: just like an erva situation, the status of an erva prevents tfisas kedushin, it could also break up tfisas kedushin. Meaning she was an HSC, she became an erva, and now the ishus is completely gone. No need for a get. Enhu mafkia afli acha shekfar chol ela v'shita brash, that the kedushin were chal and they terminate. What do the goyim call it? Annulment, right? You remember that word annulment, right? Judaism doesn't have annulment. Either he dies or he gives her a get, but there's no such thing as annulling a marriage. But there is such a thing, according to Rashi. Even in Jewish law, there's annulment. How? If she becomes an erva. Af shadai lo hoisa erva b'shas kedushin im te'osa erva li achar mikan yipaku kidushel rishon. The original kedushin are null and void because she now became an erva. V'im came l'Rabbi Akiva. Ein kedushin tosim b'chayvei lav. Just give me one more minute just to get the logic, the structure of it. Now, what happens? Tosas kasha is that in case of chayvei lav, we're going to apply the principle of what? Esei dochalosas. That's only going to help us with Bia Rishona. You guessed it, right? Because Bia Rishona is the mitzvah of Yibur. But what's going to happen when you get to Bia Shtia? There's no Esei dochalosas. Is therefore liachar Bia Rishona yipaka hayibur. The entire ishus that was created by Yibur is going to just go up in smoke. And why is that so? Because there's no Esei dochalosas there. And although there was Esei dochalosas at the time that he consummated the Yibur, and therefore she became an Eishes Ish, but now the Ishus is going to go up in thin air, it's going to dissipate because we're holding like Rashi now, that a woman who's an erva, even if the Kedushin were chal, it's going to undermine the Kiddushin. Bishuv lo tia ishta. Sharei after the essay dochalos eseh, Eino niteres, this principle of essay dochalos can only apply, bibir rishona, bilvad. Then he gets to be a shnia, choseres liyaser olav. We don't longer have an essay to be docha because the essay you already fulfilled with bir rishona. Shekvanis kaimo essay. Nimtza, shekol kinyan ayiba biyavama hasur lo bisolav, l'Rabbi Akiva, Eino elo kinyan lizman. Where is the Avnei Malun taking us? See, that's why I wanted to get to the punch. If, according to Rabbi Akiva, after consummating the Yibum, and now we're up to Bia Shnia, so we no longer have an essay to be Docha the Losas, that the Ishus is going to go up in smoke, then by definition, the original Ishus was an Ishus Lizman. Now, can I marry a woman and say, Areat Mekudeshes Li, Lishloshim Yom? But this is a sugi actually of Masechet Yevamot. Gemara there talks about a person who designates an animal as Hegdesh, and he says, Harei zu Hegdesh Lishloshim Yom. And the Gemara says, Kedusha Leichan Parcha, Lo Parcha B'chti. You can't just create a time limit in Hegdesh. And Kedushin is also Hegdesh, right? Loshin Kedushin, but is also Kuli Alma Hegdesh. And therefore, there's no such thing as a kinyan lizman. Umiachar called kinyan lizman eino kinyan peros. Now we really get complicated. Says the Avnei Malun, we have another principle here, and that is a kinyan lizman can only work as a kinyan peros. What does that mean? If I sell you a piece of land for 30 days, then what I'm doing is I'm giving you rights to eat the produce of the land for 30 days. But I'm not selling you the karka itself, because that's a kinyan lizman. But I could be makna to you rights in the karka with a kinyan lizman to eat the peros. So if you produce peros for that period of time, you can sell them, they're yours. So in effect, when he's makadesh her through yibum, but only for bia rishona, that means for a certain period of time, she has what's called a kinyan peros. Because again, a kinyan lizman, a time-limited kinyan is called a kinyan peros. Says the Avnei Malun, me'achar shekol kinyan lizman eino kinyan peros, kaimalon. Again, this is a sugya nedarim, she'ein kinyan peros be'isha. Now, what does that mean, ein kinyan peros be'isha? The truth is that the ksuba is full of kinyan peros, but the kiddushin per se could not be a kinyan peros. I can't be kona the isha such that any produce that she, let's say she works and she gets wages and so forth, I'm kona the wages. That's not a kinyan ishus. Kinyan ishus is a kinyan aguf. As a result of the fact that there's no kinyan aguf, because after Bia Rishona, the kinyan is going to be completely undermined and terminated. I end up with a kinyan lizman. There's no such thing as being makadesh and isha with a kinyan lizman. And now what are you going to tell me? Tosas kasha. What about esei tochalosa? Lo yoel din esei tochalosa latira trei eda yachol liknos. Yemena konos of the biyoso ena makayim b'chach. This is Hebrew. There are at least 5 different premises that Avnei Malun is assuming. The last premise is that in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Yibum, I need to be kona the Yibum. But I can't be kona because the kinyan lizman and there's no kinyan in ishus lizman. So Mamela essay tochalosa can't kick in because there is no mitzvah essay. Because the essay of Yibum is contingent on a full-fledged kinyan. Now, if any of you gentlemen would like to repeat this Avnei Malun from A to Z, you get some sort of prize. I don't know, Steve. What do they give as a prize in your school for an outstanding? But we'll go over it one more time.
You have an example that you have kiddushin and then she comes to erva. How does that happen?
Well, at least we have this case. Another case would be if, let's say, for example, a man was married to Leah, and then he went ahead and he married Rachel. and now Leah becomes a chos ishta. So what's going to happen to the ishus now? You follow?
How does she become?
Oh, okay. So that's going to be a problem. I'm not going through all the nitty-gritty details, but in a case where she now became related to me, or for example, if let's say he became a krushivka, and therefore according to Rabbi Akiva and Kedushin Tosa B'Chavi Lavin, that's going to virtually blow up the issues. Why? Because there's no such thing as issues in Chavi Lavin. So we'll have to go through the various sugyas and shas. This is like an introduction to Noshim. And throughout Seder Noshim, we're going to have situations in which a woman is married, the marriage is found, and then later on, she became an erva.
How do you become a sister?
What do you say?
How do you become a sister when you weren't a sister before?
No, he married her sister. So if again, you have to know whether Kedushin is chal or not. But let's say in a case where the Kedushin would be chal, then she, the first wife, now becomes an ervative because machos ishta. I'm just giving you a theoretical case. That's not really a practical case.
But he can't get married to his wife.
Right. So that's a technical question. You have to see in a case where there would be Kedushin. But here, let's just leave it with our case. Here's a perfect case. A man was miyabe chayve lavin, which again he could be miyabe halachora because of esi dokolo. So that's Tosas kasha. And now, after bir rishona, once he consummates the marriage, there is no longer a mitzvah of yibum. If there's no longer a mitzvah of yibum, then the original Easter of chayve lavin, let's say she's mamzeres or tzuadaka, all these cases, is now going to make it impossible for him to have a marriage relationship with them. Because no tfisas kedushin according to Rabbi Akiva in chayve lavin. So it turns out that his yibum was only a marriage lizman. It would last only as long as vir rishona, but after vir rishona, the marriage is completely dissolved or annulled, whatever you want to call it. Says the Avnei Miluim, whenever you have a kinyan that's going to dissolve at a certain point in time, it's called a kinyan lizman. And a kinyan lizman, says the Avnei Miluim, is equal to a kinyan peros. And a kinyan peros is valid in hard, real estate or property, but it doesn't apply to issues. There's no such thing as a kinyan peros with regard to issues. So if you put all these things together, you have an answer to Tosas Kash. Because since there's no such thing as a kinyan issues lizman, then mainly he wasn't a kind of mitzvah yibum, and we can no longer apply the principle of esei dochalosis. So just to fill you in on yesterday, our problem yesterday was the Gemara assumes that what's called Iser Kedusha, that Rabbi Akiva would hold that there is no yibum. So Tosas asks, why not? It's only chayve lam. With regard to chayve lam, have a principle of esei dochalosis. So we've been working overtime to try to figure out why there's no esei dochalosis. And the Avnei Miluim thinks that he solved the problem. Because of Rashi's famous shita, that just like you can't create issues with an erva, so too, you can't have issues with an erva. So even if you created issues, you can't have issues. The issues cannot continue if she's an erva. And now that she became an erva, the kedushin are gone. Says the Avnei Miluim, after bir rishona, there's no longer tfisas kedushin. The kedushin are going to be dissolved, which makes it into a kinyan lizman, which is a kinyan peres. It's not kinyan peres and issues. Hence, he cannot be mekayim the mitzvah yibum because yibum depends upon a key.
I'm a little concerned about the zman. It isn't really that.
I mean, maybe. Well, let me ask you this: even if he hasn't implemented a bia shnia, but would the halacha allow him to have a bia shnia? It could only apply under the law of esei dochalosis. So the Avnei Miluim says very well. There's no way that you can apply esei dochalosis to him because the very moment that he's not allowed to have a bia with her, the kedushin is paka. If the kedushin is paka, then you don't have a mitzvah yibum, and then there's no esei dochalosis. So I just wanted to look at the next paragraph Ve'harbe achronim hirbu l'tmoa b'dvar. Shenistar me midivrei hagemara li'el. Shemashma. She'ilu haya esei dochalosas sheyesh bo kares. You remember the Gemara had a Havamina based on the drasha of Esapsosai Tishmaru that an essay could override a losa sheyesh bo kares. Is misvara haisa erva muteris liyama. Right, we need a pasuk litzar to prove that there's no yibum in the case of an erva, because otherwise we would have applied the principle of esei dochalosas. Ulidvarav matoil adchia, because again, according to the Avnei Meluim, the dechia can only apply to bir chona when he's being makayim the mitzvah of yibum. It can have no impact on bir shnia. So matoil adchia meaning esei dochalosas. Hello, sofa kedusha lipaka. Why? Because even if the erva was set aside by virtue of esei dochalosas, and therefore he was able to implement yibum, but nevertheless now the ishus is going to go up in smoke because of bia shnia, and bia shnia doesn't have an essay, so there's nothing to override the law. In this case, kares of achosishna is mela. The entire ishus is going to be paka, and if the entire ishus is paka, according to the Avnei Meluim, it's a kinyan lizman, and there's no kinyan lizman in an isha. It's memela ein lem lochel meikara. So how could the Avnei Meluim make such a mistake? The Gemara, an entire sugi, is predicated on esei dochalosas, and yet according to the Avnei Meluim, esei dochalosas is only going to help you for the first bia. Memela, the erva is going to set in and undermine the kedusha, blow it up completely, and then it becomes a kinyan lizman. Umilvadzos dvar tmuim b'svara l'fisha kinyan peres uvak im mitchila lo nasa els. Oh, this I think was Jeff, was your point, maybe. When do we apply the principle of kinyan peres? That's when I sold you something for a limited amount of time. But here, in the case of Yibum, he didn't intend to be miyavim her and say to her, all right, you know what, I'm going to be your husband just for the first week of our marriage. Meaning now that he's implemented bir rishon, we're up to bir shnia. Now we're going to remove the essay, and by removing the essay, we're going to impose a afkos kedusha. That's not called a kinyan lizman. Kinyan lizman is not a result of something that comes into being later. Kinyan lizman means that from the get-go, the kinyan was a limited time period. And therefore he says, liachar mikan, meaning after bir rishon, ba isum afkir, afkazu mischadeshes, rak liachar hakinyan. Like kinyan atzmo, nasa ulo hadmo. So the Achronim attack the Avnei Meluim from two different sides. One is from the sugi of esei dochalosas, which the Gemara wants to apply to the case of an erva yibum. That makes no sense, according to the Avnei Meluim, because esei dochalosas can only help you for the bir rishona, and after bir shnia, the entire ishus is going to go up in smoke. Secondly, according to the Avnei Meluim, how do we apply the principle of kinyan lizman over here? This is not a kinyan lizman. Kinyan lizman means if I establish a kinyan for a certain period of time, if circumstances arise subsequent to the original kinyan inherently was liola, but now a new scenario was generated, and as a result, the kinyan has to come to an end. That's not called a kinyan lizman. In my humble opinion, the Avnei Meluim could deflect both of these. As far as the first question of esei dochalosas, said the Gemara at that point thinks that esei dochalosas said would allow tfisas kedushin such that now they're full-fledged eishesish, and there's no need to be matir bir shnia. It's only later the Gemara on Daf Ches came up with the svara to be machalik between bir rishon and bir shnia. And secondly, as far as a kinyan lizman is concerned, if you know up front that this kinyan by definition cannot last because it's based on esei dochalosa, which only applies to bir rishona, that makes it into a kinyan lizman. Now, finally, you have something called the Gilyoni Hashas. Now, I think the Gilyoni Hashas is published on the page. Is it not? I don't know. I'm having trouble finding it. Let's see. You have, I'm just curious if Gilyoni Hashas is, no, you don't have it either. Maybe it's a flaw in my Gemara. Because usually Gilyoni Hashas appears on the page and it's authored by Rabbi Kivega. Unless maybe this is Gilyoni Hashas later on in the set. Let me just ask you a favor. You have a regular Gemara in front of you? Doc, you have a regular Gemara? Well, Jeff, you have article. Where does it end? That volume of article. Does it include Daf Chaf?
No?
Oh, it does. Take a look for a second on Daf Chaf. If there's anything on the side, Gilyoni Hashas. I don't have Daf Chaf. I have the first volume of the Sifra.
Yes.
Oh, there is a Gilyoni Hashas. Okay. So if you keep one finger on Gilyoni Hashas there and another finger on the Alpid Abiuri and do a comparative study. So I have a feeling that this Gilyoni Hashas he's quoting is printed on Daf Chaf. I have no way of proving that, but you'll prove it one way or the other. Gilyoni Hashas kosa b'yishuv kushas hakosus hadnal shehine dona hagemara lahalbon. So this is a sugya later on Daf Chaf. Madua esei b'yibum docha lotas. Oh, this is a beautiful kasha of the Gemara. Right, you remember Rabbi say that we always have an option of chalitza. And esei docha lotas that doesn't apply when you can have your cake and eat it too. In other words, if you can achieve the mitzvah and circumvent the avera, then we don't allow you to be doched a lot. So the Gemara asks the kasha, why would an essay of Yibum have the power to be doched a lav of an erva? If you can fulfill the essay without violating the lav, then ain't essay dochelosis. Elias kai b'shneim. He's forced to do it in a way that he avoids violating the law. Like we asked the question, remember about Kilayim and Tzitzis. Who says that he has to wear a beged of Kilayim? So he could be Makai the mitzvah of Kilayim and the mitzvah of Tzitzis, just that he'll use a beged that's either all Pishtan or all Seven. And therefore, even Yibum is Efshal Kaima Eseh. Through what? Through Chalitza. In other words, the Gemara is of the opinion that you could be Makayim the mitzvah as a Yom in one of two ways, and they're Shavim v'Shavim. Two roads diverge, bless you, in a yellow wood, and they're equal. Take your choice. You want Yibum? Take Yibum. You want Chalitza? Take Chalitza. Not that Chalitza is a fallback measure, because you refuse to be Makayim the mitzvah, so we'll give you an option to be Matir the Yavama through Chalitza. No. Chalitza is a mitzvah. In fact, there's a chapter in Masechet Yevamot. It's called Mitzvah Chalitza. That's what we're learning at 11:15 or whatever, right? So there's a mitzvah Chalitza. Why do you have to violate the law of an erva by having a relationship with her being a kind Yibur? Circumvent the law by being a kind Chalitza. The Yashva, the Gemara gives the following answer: No. You got it all wrong. It's not that Chalitza is a mitzvah. Ikar mitzvah he be Yibur. The mitzvah is Yibum. And in this case of an erva, there's no way that you can have your cake and eat it, be Makayim the mitzvah Yibum, without violating the law. Chalitza, the Makam Yibum, ain't a mitzvah. When there's a mitzvah Yibum, Chalitza is not a mitzvah. Again, it's a fallback position to be matir, but it's not a mitzvah. Says Rabbi Akiva, Itas, Rabbi Akiva, Loke. Now, I'm not sure. In my book, it seems to quote the Zohar. Is that possible? I assume you have the same text that I do because you're a photocopy.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is a peloton.
Why, what's wrong?
I don't know. A Zohar is usually connected to the parasha. it's an interpretation of the psukim. I didn't know that the Zohar was an interpretation of a sheet of Tanoim in a pure halachic context. But anyway, so the Zohar says, in the name of Rabbi Akiva, Vishalach ish nalo, and this is a pasuk in Rus, zu mitzvahs chalitza. V'nasan l'reyehu, this I don't understand. Zu mitzvahs yibum. I don't know why v'nasan l'reyehu is yibum, but okay, fine. Mikan Omer Rabbi Akiva, it's a quote from the Zohar. Mitzvahs chalitza kodemes l'mitzvahs yibum. Because if you look at the sequence, so v'shalafin now is number one. That's your first preferable option, and that's chalitza. Nalo is chalitza. And then we'll give you another option. What's the sixth? Again, how's this lahakim shem? You know, the whole purpose of even is lahakim zera l'shem. I don't know. But Rabbi Akiva's principle in the Zohar is mitzvahs chalitza kodemes lemitzvahs yibum. Well, nimtza kil Rabbi Akiva ein esei b'yibum dol chalosas. There's no possibility of esei dol chalosas. It's exceptionally kind of stand. He could win on both sides. He doesn't have to violate the law to be kind of the essay because mitzvahs chalitza kodemes mitzvahs yibum. Shrei efshe b'chalitza. Val kein l'shitaso ein chayvei lavin misyabenes. Because what was Tos's kasha? Okay, chayvei lavin according to Rabbi Akiva is an ervan and uses kedushin. But so what? We're going to apply the principle of esei dochalosa. But Rabbi Akiva l'shitaso never accepted esei dochalosa with regard to yibum. Because in Yibum, we have Efshel Kaim Shneim because mitzvahs chalitza kodemes. Umemela aflo chaletzes. Rabbi Yevamot ein tosim b'kedushim v'kaimel kol shein ol liyibum ein ol chalit. Now here Rabbi Akiva has a problem because okay, fine, you're going to tell me that there's no esei dochalosas, but what about chalitza? You're telling me that mitzvahs chalitza kodemes, and you have, according to Rabbi Akiva, the case of chayvei lavin. There's no way we can say esei dochalosa because you have efshel kaim shneim and you can be mekayim through chalitza. But why not say in the case of chayvei lavin we should require chalitza? Rabbi Akiva went as far as to say that we don't require neither yibum nor chalitza. Rabbi Akiva has to invoke a principle of kol she'ena ol liyibum ena ol chalitza. And the way we interpreted that principle is that why is she not ol liyibum? There's no zikas yibum. If there's no zikas yibum, then there's no requirement of chalitza. Okay, so now Rabbi said we go back to daf. And then, yeah, please.
No.
Please, I'm sorry.
So there's no hekhet said that you should think that if yibum makes an issue, then we should do chalitza. That's the minhag that we have today. We have always do chalitza because the isur also my brother's wife is an erva, so it's a love the kapchila. It's always if it's yibum, it has to be the yibum comes on the isur only if they don't have children. And also, I don't know why he brings the Zohar Kadosh. The Zohar Kadosh, it talks about the pasuk Zota Tuna Israel. Well, Kalasek Nalo, Natan Reim. There, the Zohar Kadosh talks about that the neshama, the husband who passed away, can't be free, and the neshama has to come, and therefore, and the now is representing someone's going. As soon as she gives the na'al, that frees the neshama. So also,
it's interesting that first the pasuk mentions chalitza, and then yibum. And Rabbi Akiva in the Zohar is quoted as saying that mitzvah chalitza kodemes. I'm wondering what that means. Mitzvah chalitza kodemes. It seems to undermine the whole purpose of the mitzvah of yibum.
Because the pasuk says Natan Reim was there. There it's talking about when he gives his shoe. Takes off the shoe and he gives it to the.
That's the Ploni Almoni.
Israel, then you make a deal.
Right. Because he's giving up on his rights to our possessions.
And I believe they say that the communities like the Taimanim, that they had Yibum, they have written that always that always they wanted to prove that it's the neshama of the husband. So they say there's always a son, not a daughter. I don't know. Even if we research that, I don't know if we should write it on
Yeah.
shots.
Okay. So now on both sides, we're going to take a look at the last line on Daf Tesam and Aleph in order to go forward on Daf Tesam and Beis. So the Gemara says that the plukta lo kamayri, meaning, right, we had a discussion between Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and Levi. Levi wanted to add another category to a Mishnah called Anusas Aviv, and Rebbe came down very hard on Levi, right? He used a very extreme term, because the plukta lo kamay, and the Anusas Aviv is a machlokes tanon. So now the Gemara is asking, V'harei eishes achiv shelo hoya ba'olam. If you have two brothers, and the younger brother was born after the death of the older brother, then there's no yibum. And that's based on the pasuk. The pasuk says that Yeshvu, what does it say in the pasuk? Yeshvu achiv Yaakov, right? Now, if there's no yibum in Esha in Achiv Shalohoya Bobo, then the Mela, we go back to the original Erev Avad. We're on the top of Tesla and Beis, on the top one, right? Then she goes back to the status of Esha's Achiv. And there's not going to be any yibum or any chalitza in the case of Achiv Shalohoya Ba'olam. Now, is that really true? Well, yes, it is according to the Rabbana, but it's not true according to Rabbi Shimon. And that's the top line here on Daf Tesam Beis. The pligi Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan, and this Gemara is on Daf Yud Ches Amid Beis. And Rabbi Shimon requires chalitza in a case of Achiv Shalohoya Ba'olam. We'll see that he drops yibum for a rabbinic reason, but on a deraisa level, she falls for yibum to the other brother. And even though that brother was Lohoya Ba'olam, Ukitani, and yet the Mishnah mentions at the beginning of Masechet Yevamot the case of Achiv Shalohoya Be'olama, which could only make sense according to the Rabbanan and not according to Reb Shimon, based on a Gemara later on in Daf Yud Ches. And this is going to be a problem for Rebbe, because Rebbe says B'pluta lo kamayra, that our Mishnah is universally accepted. There is completely unanimous vote on everything that appears in our Mishnah. And that's not really true. That's the Gemara's kashim, because Achiv Shalohoya Ba'olam requires chalitza according to Reb Shimon, and our Mishnah says that there's no chalitza, no yibum. Let's talk a little bit about Reb Shimon. There's a definite and a question, meaning there's one case where Reb Shimon clearly requires chalitza. And there's another case where it's very unclear what Reb Shimon's opinion is. So let's start with the simple case, the definite case. We have three brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven and Shimon are alive at the same time. Levi is not alive. So Reuven dies, and Levi has not yet been born. Now, what's going to happen to Reuven's wife is that Shimon is going to be Miyabe and Reuven's wife, and then Shimon, unfortunately, dies without children. So this woman, who was originally married to Reuven, subsequently married to Shimon, now falls for Yibum to Levi. So what's the case in which, according to Reb Shimon, there is Yibum? The case is that Levi was born after Shimon consummated the marriage with Ashes Reuben. In other words, the Yibum took place before Levi was born. So we're going to have two scenarios. One scenario is that Levi was born after the Yibum of Shimon to Reuben's wife. And the other is that although Levi was not alive at the time of Reuven, but he was born immediately after Reuven's death, even before Shimon got a chance to be Miyabim, the wife of Reuven. So the simple case that's undeniable in Rav Shimon, in the framework of Rav Shimon, is the case that we mentioned before, where Levi was born after Shimon was Miyabim, the wife of Reuven. If Levi was born after Shimon was Miyabim, the wife of Reuven, then, and I'm using the Be'eri here that we mentioned in the past, the Ichus between this woman and Reuven is history. It's gone. Shimon is Miyabim. Now she's considered Ashes Shimon. She's no longer Ashes Reuven. That's the breakthrough of Rav Shimon, the way the Be'eri explains it. And now when Levi is born into a situation where this woman is Ashes Shimon, and he and Shimon are still alive. When Shimon dies, Levi, let's say the other way around, the wife of Shimon, who was originally the wife of Reuven, now falls for Yibum to Levi. That's not called Achiv Shalochai Ba'olam. Why? Because they are Ba'olam. Because both Shimon and Levi are alive at the same time. Shimon, after the birth of Levi, marries Ashes Reuven. I'm sorry, scratch it. Sorry, I missed them, right? So what happened? Shimon married Ashes Reuven before the birth of Levi. By the time Levi comes onto the scene, this woman is Ashes Shimon, which replaces the Ishus to Reuven. So there's no issue of Ashes Achiv. She's only Ashes Achiv vis-a-vis Shimon. And now Shimon dies, and she falls to evil. So that when Levi is born, he is really meant to be Miyabim, this woman. Again, for technical reasons I don't want to get into right now, we'll figure this out later on. He's not going to be Miyabim her, but he has to give a chalitz. And this is a Doraisa law. What would be?
Only because there was a older brother, Reuben, who already passed away.
No, I'm saying
Why?
only because Shimon, the younger brother, was Miyabim Ashes Reuben before Levi was born. Therefore, when Levi comes into the scene with his birth, what he's looking at is a woman who's Ashes Shimon. Shimon is alive and well. Levi's alive. So Shimon and Levi are Ba'olam Achas. We're not going to consider him Lo Haya Ba'olamo because he didn't share any moment of life with Reuven. Reuven's out of the picture. Reuven is history. Because Reuven's wife, once she is subject to Yibum by Shimon, she now becomes Ashes Shimon. And the Be'eri says that the Ishus of this woman to Reuven is now replaced. It's partially replaced by the Ishus to Shimon. So again, we're going to get to that. Again, we can't answer all the questions at once. That's the nature of the game. We're learning this together. But the point is that really in truth, this woman falls to Yibum with a full-fledged seeker to Levi because Shimon's Ishus replace the Ishus of Reuven. However, what about a case where Levi was born before Shimon was Miyabim, Ashes Reuven? And at this point, the Zika is very much alive. Again, there was no moment of time in which Levi shared as a living being with Reuven, but nevertheless, the Zika of Reuven's wife is out there. It's in existence. It's extant, I guess you would say, at the time that Levi was born. Therefore, there's going to be an Ashes Ach Erva relationship between this woman and Levi insofar as she's the Ashes Reuven. And there's no possibility of Yibum to Ashes Reuven as far as Levi is concerned, because Levi was not Ba'olamo. He didn't share one moment of time with Reuven. So therefore, the wife of Reuven, who's now Skuka Yibum, Levi is now born as a Zikas Yibum. Shimon is not yet, what's the word I want to use, consummated the Yibum. And therefore, we see a relation between this woman and not only Levi, because Levi is now a Yavam, but also Reuven, because that Zika of Ashes Reuven has never been removed at the time of Levi's birth. So the Gemara now is going to say the following: B'nolad u'lebasof yiben lo polig Reb Shimon. Do you have that line? Top line on Daf Tesamid Beis. B'nolad u'lebasof yiben lo polig Reb Shimon, which means the following: that if Levi was nolad, and only after his birth, Shimon was miyabim Ashes Reuven, lo polig Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon would agree in that case that there's no yibum to Levi. Why? Because the nefila for yibum, which applies the moment that Reuven dies, that nefila for yibum cannot possibly be consummated by Levi, because Levi was lo chaya ba'olama. So as a result of that nefila liyibum, Ashes Reuven becomes asura on Levi with the erva of Ashes Achiv shelo chaya ba'olama, meaning Ashes Achiv. Once she's asura to Levi b'taras Ashes Achiv, then even if subsequently Shimon is miyabem the wife of Reuven, and then Shimon dies, Levi is out of the picture, because she is Ashes Achiv of whom? Of Reuven. You follow that? Therefore, the Gemara says that we can defend Rebbe. Rebbe's position was beplug to lo kamayri, because when the Mishnah mentions Ashes Achiv shelo ba'olam, it's exactly this case of nolad u'lebesof yibeh. And even Reb Shimon would agree that Levi could not be miyabeh the wife of Reuven, who's now the wife of Shimon. Why? Because Levi was alive before Shimon consummated that evil, and the nefila of, well, I don't remember what her name was, but whatever we called her, Leah, from Reuven is still active the moment that Levi is born, and therefore she, the wife of Reuven, becomes Ashes Achiv shelo chaya ba'olama. The Gemara says that's fine until we get to Rav Oshia. But Amar Rabbi Oshia cholak hayir Rav Shimon af barishona, which means that according to Rabbi Oshia's version of Rabbi Shimon's point was that the issues between Leah and Reuven can be replaced by the yibum of Shimon, no matter what. It doesn't matter whether Levi is alive or not alive. According to Rav Oshia and Rav Shimon, if you get the names right, the very moment that Shimon consummates the yibum with Ashes Reuven, she's no longer Ashes Reuven. She's now Ashes Shimon. And when Shimon dies, she falls for yibum to Levi. That's the most extreme version or variation of Rabbi Shimon. That's Rav Oshia. And in that case, you don't have any scenario of Achiv shelo chaya ba'olama without yibum. Rav Shimon has the most extreme shita, and there's no yibum and no chalitza. Right. In other words, again, as far as shelo chaya ba'olama is concerned, again, you have to be very careful. I mean, there will be yibum here because Levi is going to be miyabim Ashes Shimon. It's the same woman who was Ashes Reuven, but nevertheless, she's no longer Ashes Reuven. Once she becomes Ashes Shimon, because Shimon was Mekayim in the midst of Yibum, And therefore, the fact that Levi was lo haya ba'olamo of Ruvain does not exclude the possibility of Yibum. Therefore, we have no way whatsoever of reconciling our Mishnah with the Shita of Rav Shimon. What are we going to do according to Rebbe, who says Beplukta lo kamayim? So Gemara answers, Oy Tosav Rabbi Oshia. The Gemara later on at Daf Yutes is going to completely reject Rabbi Oshia, and what that means is that we're not going to accept Rabbi Oshia, and therefore Rabbi Shimon, in the case of Nolad, right? No, Rabbi Shimon Shita is only in the case of Yibam ulu b'sof Nolad, but in the case of Nolad ulu b'sof Yibam, even Rabbi Shimon agrees that there's going to be an erev of Eishes Achim of Ruvain, and therefore there's no Yibam. Okay. Now we move on to another case, which the Gemara is going to insist is totally beplukta. Again, another objection to Rebbe, who says beplukta lo kamayim. Okay. So I think I mentioned to you in the past that the Masechet has a long introduction to the sugya that we're about to embark upon. I'm going to give you, shall we say, Rashi Prakim of this introduction. What we're going to talk about is a nefila liyibum of two sisters. However, one of those two sisters, right, and the nefila liyibum is the two brothers, right? So we have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. And both Reuven and Shimon are going to die without children. And therefore, respectively, their wives will fall for Yibum to Levi and Yehuda. Now,
Why can't Levi marry both?
so we're going to have a scenario where let's call these two women X and Y, just for a second. Then we can give them more proper names, right? So if these two women, X is an erva to Levi, and Y is an erva to Shimon. Just to give it to you in abstract terms. And therefore, if Asur lezeh, Muteres lezeh, and vice versa, therefore, there's going to be Yibum with the Tsar, the other wife. Why? Okay, we'll flesh it out with the example in a second. That's his diagram. I don't know if you have a copy of it. Because there's no longer a nefila of the two sisters, because one of those two sisters is an erva. So he can be miyavi the other wife of Reuven or of Shimon in each case, because they are no longer what we call achos zikukasa. Okay, so the key term here that we want to remember is achos zikukasa. What's the case? Arba achim, shahayu shnayim mehem nisuim l'shtei achos. Okay, so let's see if he gives it a name. We'll try to follow his names. Or Rachel and Leah. Okay, that's pretty good. So Reuben is married to Rachel, and Shimon is married to Leah. And Reuben and Shimon die, and Rachel and Leah fall for Yibum to Levi and Yehuda. So you have two sisters falling from two different brothers to both Levi and Yehuda. So I'll read it again. Arba achim shahayu shnayim mehem nesuim l'shtei achios. This is from the Masechet. I told you he has a very long introduction. I'm just trying to give you what I think are the highlights of this introduction. And tomorrow, believe that we'll get into the, into the kishkis of the sukkah. So Mesu Bale Achios below Bonin. So Reuben and Shimon were married to Levi and Rachel, who are sisters. So two brothers married two sisters. And these two brothers died. Nishoseim Cholzos Li'echad Me'ha'achim Hanosorim Aval Enon Misyavmos Lahem. So that means that, let's say, Levi, I'm just giving you an example, Levi will be Choletz of Rachel, and Yehuda will be Choletz Leah. But there's no possibility of Yibum. Batam, Bishum, Shalistei Ha'achios, Yes Zikas Yibum. He says Yevamot. I write L'shnei Yevamot. I think it'd be clearer. So both these sisters have a Zika relationship to both of these brothers. Isn't that clear?
Yeah, so why doesn't he say that Shimon gives Chalitza?
Maybe that's also possible. I don't know.
Yeah.
He says the Shosem Cholzos Li Echad Me'achim Anasom. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it does. I gave a more dramatic example, but you're right. They both will get chalitza from one of these two brothers, but there's no yibum. Why is there no yibum? So the answer is, he call achas me'achios, he achos zekukaso shel hayavam. Either one, whether it's Leah or Rachel, is the sister of a zkuka, because both of these women fell for yibum. The asu chachamim al adam es achos zkukasa, mishum she doma lachos ishta. Does everybody have that clearly? That these two women, Rachel and Leah, fall for yibum, both to Levi and to Yehuda. They are two sisters, and now there's a zika to these two sisters. And a zika to two sisters means that each sister is like achotz ishto, because zika is domel ichus. However, the Mishnah says, "Im hoisa achas mea achlos asura al echad mea achim v'isur erva." So forget about achos kukasa. One of these two women is an erva to one of these two brothers, to either Levi or to Yehuda. And that's where he has Seir Nun Beis, which I think you might have a copy of. Well, what do we decide at the end, Steve? We are making copies, we're not making copies? The expanded diagrams.
I tried. I don't.
You tried? So you want to just take it into your hands? I mean, it's not hooked to.
Okay, no. We have
What?
We have some pictures.
Oh, okay, but for my,
Yeah.
if we go into too many pictures, we're in trouble. At the top, on the,
Okay.
Nun, right? It should say Nun Gimel, actually.
Yeah.
You see Nun Gimel, it's the
Yeah.
middle one on the top line. So again, Hoisa Achas Mea Achios, Asur al Echad Mea Achim, Be'isur Erva, Milvad Isur Achos Kupaso, Areu Osur Gam Ba, Rak Ba, Umuter Bachosa. What happened to Achos Kupaso? But the answer is, Mikevan Erva Ptura Michalitza Be'yivu, Shuv Ein His Kukasa. Because that Erva relationship, there is no Zika. Umemela, Afachosa, Ein Achos Kukasa. So therefore, he could be Mekayim the bits of Yibum because the other wife is an Erva. So I think in the picture, again, I'm going to try to strain my eyes here if I can get this right. So you have a father, he's got 4 sons. You see that? And there's an X on 2 of them. That means Reuben and Shimon died. And Reuben was married to Rachel, and Shimon was married to Leah. Now, what's the Erev relationship? He doesn't actually. Yeah, he doesn't spell it out. Right? It says Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Rachel, Masechet. Oh, so Rachel is one of the 15 arayos of Levi. So since she's one of the 15 arayos of Levi, therefore Rachel is not skukasa. And Memela, Leah is not achos skukasa. So he actually, I was anticipating that he would work out, exactly what the Erev is. He just said one of the 15 arayos.
I mean, here is the example, they said their mother.
Oh, mothers-in-law. So one of the 2 sisters is a mother-in-law to one of the 2 brothers.
And the other one is mother-in-law to the other brother.
Oh,
So they're both, the sisters are mother-in-law to the opposite brother.
so we didn't get to that case yet.
Oh.
You're a step ahead.
Oh,
That's going to be the next case.
okay.
No, just to make life easy, he goes through 2 cases. First case where
Oh,
there's an
just
Erev
one.
relationship just to Levi and not to you. Right. So Levi could therefore be Miyavim, the sister. Reuven, I'm sorry, Yehuda doesn't have any option. Now, then we have your case where Leah is an erva to, let's say, Levi, and Rachel is an erva to Yehuda. Therefore, both Yehuda and Levi have options of Yibum because there's no achos kukoso because of the erva wish.
Levi was originally married to me, who is the daughter of his older brother's.
Is that the case? As a niece? You said a mother-in-law.
Well, how can my sister-in-law be also my mother-in-law?
Okay, so that's the
Only if
diagram.
I marry my niece.
That's,
How else?